Trust me, Ken, you will not turn into some like monster after you float. I promise you that. I was going through a little bit of a crisis where I left a really good gig, but another gig lined up. You know, people have been soaking in Epsom salt baths for centuries. Nothing like 1,000 pounds. And when you're soaking in 1,000 pounds of it, it increases circulation. It reduces inflammation. It's nourishment to the body. It's great for the hair, skin, and bones.
Hey, welcome to the Manceptional Podcast. This is your host, Ken Arcega. Today, we are going to speak with Jeff Ono. He's the owner of Pause Float Studio. Those are the sensory deprivation tanks you may have heard of, either if you've watched the movie Altered States, movie way back from 1980, or heard Joe Rogan talk about it. Jeff has been involved in the fitness and service industry for the past 14 years. He's been in management and leadership at places such as Equinox and the Sports Club LA, which you may have heard of. So we look forward to finding out how he went from working in that industry and taking a little bit of a sideways tangent and getting into the float space, wellness space, should we say, as well as finding out a little bit more specifically about floating, how it works, what the benefits are. As well, he does have IR saunas, which is infrared sauna. So we'll ask him a little bit about that. Jeff, thank you for coming on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Ken. Appreciate it.
So I've got a question for you. I actually tried the floating for the first time 2 weeks ago, which was pretty cool. And I always wanted to do it because of a movie that I saw back in 1980, which was Altered States. I'm just curious, did that play any role in you getting into this at all? Or do you even know what I'm talking about?
I absolutely know what you're talking about. And we get a lot of people coming into the studio referencing Altered States. And trust me, Ken, you will not turn into some like monster after you float. I promise you that. But it's interesting because, you know, floating's actually been around since the 1950s. And that's been developed in kind of a laboratory type setting. And Altered States kind of took that and ran with it. But it's been around for so long, it just hasn't really hit the mainstream yet. Altered States was the first time it really hit kind of the mainstream population. It wasn't a very good representation of sensory deprivation. But it was good. And, you know, now The Simpsons featured floating like 15 years ago. Stranger Things, the hottest television show on Netflix right now, Flotation Therapy plays a pretty prominent role in that. So it's interesting. Hollywood has kind of been a little bit ahead of the curve, you know.
Yeah,
on floating therapy.
I heard a lot about it from Joe Rogan, who's got a float tank, I guess, in his house. And so I don't know if he's got a big following. He might have made it a little bit popular. But do you find, as you're marketing to everyone where you know you just opened this one here, that you're here, do you find people already know what it is, or do you have to do some education in your marketing?
Yeah. So good question. It's a pretty wide spectrum of people here. And, you know, I'd say a lot of our initial clientele were people that had already heard of or experienced flotation therapy. So as soon as we opened the doors, we had, let's call them float enthusiasts, coming into the door as soon as we opened. A lot of people have heard of floating, but kind of know it more esoterically. They've heard of it. They think it kind of sounds a little kooky, a little cosmic-like, but they're interested. But, you know, we've been open for a year and a half. And since then, flotation therapy as a whole has been featured in almost every major newspaper, every major publication, from health and wellness to psychology to lifestyle pubs. So it's a dramatically different picture now than 18 months ago, because now the population is really starting to grasp it, especially here in Los Angeles.
So let's unpack that a little bit. You mentioned the mental health a little bit, and then kind of a, I guess, therapeutic or recovery type. So I have used Epsom salts before, putting my feet in it after I hiked up Mount Whitney, and I did feel better. So I know there's something to that there. Can you get into, are you using regular Epsom salt, or what exactly is in that water? It's, by the way, as I understand, it's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt. So when you go in that water, you feel like you're floating on top of it. It's very heavy water.
Sure. So within the float pod or the float suite, it's basically water, 160 gallons of water, and 1,000 to 1,100 pounds of grade A magnesium sulfate Epsom salt. We do drop some hydrogen peroxide in there occasionally, just to be extra safe. But other than that, those are the only ingredients in the water. So it's very pure and it's very clean.
What does the peroxide do?
What the peroxide does, quite frankly, is it just ensures that the water is a little more clear. What happens is, sometimes when we add salt, sometimes when it runs through filtration, the water gets a little bit cloudy and the hydrogen peroxide, and literally it's a dropper at the end of the night. It just helps to kind of make that water a little more clear.
Okay, got it. Okay, and then just before we move on, the filtration aspect, I noticed that you have a unit next to the pod. You were mentioning something about ozone, and how is this like? Are there actual filters like my zero water, plus ozone, or what is that little mechanism in there?
That little mechanism is like the most important mechanism, for the industry, and that's really kind of how the industry is starting to really take off now, is because people float, and it becomes a situation where it's communal water. So, a company out of the UK, 15, 20 years ago came up with this concept on how to self-filtrate that water. So within the filtration unit, a bunch of things happen, right? So the water is filtered through a very, very tight filter, and it's about 15 times more strict than a traditional swimming pool or jacuzzi. While that water is being filtered, it passes through UV light, and it's also injected or treated with pure ozone. And ozone is what treats and turns dirty water into drinking water. So you combine the filtration, the UV light, the ozone, and then you realize the fact that there's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt in there. And, the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea for a reason.
Right. Nothing goes
together, and you've got a ridiculously clean water that passes all NSF standards and all that good stuff.
Got it.
Yeah, and that filter after every client. So when you exit that pod, the filter actually runs 3 times in 15 minutes. So the entire contents of the pod is filtered 3 times in 15 minutes before the next person gets in.
Okay. I noticed when my session was over and I got out, it automatically went on. I could see the water kind of jetting through.
Yeah, it's like a little jacuzzi. It gets fun, Ken, when people don't realize it's over and they stay in there through the filtration.
Oh, has that happened?
That has happened, and we've had to go in and lift up the lid on a couple people.
Can you fall asleep in there? Like I had the lights and the music off. So for the listeners in these particular pods, you can choose to have a little nice ambient music in the back and the light on if you want. But I turned everything off so I could kind of get the full dark, sensory deprivation. But have you had people, when you say they stand there, do they fall asleep? Do they actually fall asleep while you're floating?
A lot of our clients fall asleep.
Oh man.
Yeah, and it's actually it's an amazing sleep. It's a different kind of sleep, right? So if you look at sleep cycles, you're not going to the deepest level of sleep. You're basically falling asleep. You're basically falling into that place where you're kind of awake, kind of asleep.
Okay.
It's kind of can be described as the theta state. And that's where a lot of the healing and a lot of the magic happens. So we encourage people to fall asleep in there because again,
I didn't know that. So I'm going to have to try it again because I spent the first half hour. I wasn't calm myself. I was thinking, and then I was getting used to having nothing supporting my neck and all that. But so you actually encourage people
absolutely
to fall asleep?
Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Ken, it takes time. Like anything worthwhile, right? Some people jump in the first 5 minutes. They're in it. They got it. They're in the zone for however you want to define that. But more often than not, it takes a couple sessions to get it. And one thing I wanted to add is you mentioned that at Pause you have the ability to listen to music, meditation. You can actually send us playlists that you'd like to listen to, and we can run them for you. And we've actually done something really exciting at Pause where we partnered with a company called Evenflow. and Even Flow is a meditation app. And they've custom designed 5 different meditations for us. So they've designed meditations that are specifically for flotation therapy at pause. Okay. One is stress reduction. One is to aid in a more efficient sleep. We have 2 breathwork meditations. And then we have a pregnancy meditation because flotation therapy and pregnancy is amazing, goes hand in hand. So there's a lot.
It seems like that would be good. The water, in the womb plus the woman in the water seems like it would be pretty cool.
Almost like you're in a womb within a womb, right?
Yeah.
When you're pregnant,
and it looks like a womb too. It's a pod.
When you look at, when you're pregnant, the doctors will say, the one thing that you want to make sure you do is you don't want to be stressed. You want to be relaxed throughout the pregnancy. Right. That's what flotation therapy does, right? It allows the pregnant mom to be the ability to lay comfortably on her back, right? So when they're pregnant, certainly at the end of the 3rd trimester, you can't sleep on your back comfortably. You can lay on your back comfortably in the float pod because it's a near gravity free environment, and every sort of extremity gets full circulation when you're in the float pod, right? There's no pressure that's constricting your arteries and veins and blood vessels, etc. Perfect for pregnancy.
That's awesome. Business wise, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but do you connect with, hospitals, or like how do you let the pregnant community, whatever you call that, how do you let them know that you guys are there and that's a good thing? Because I didn't even know about that really until you're just mentioning it now. Yeah.
Lots of partnerships with different mommy groups.
Okay.
Acupuncturists, massage therapists, prenatal specialists, anybody that really kind of touches the pregnancy crowd, we've reached out to and formed relationships with.
Now, did you learn about all this stuff as you were going, or did you know? Because there's a lot that we're talking about here, right? We're going to talk about the mental aspect. There's all the physiological stuff, and there's pregnancy, and there's all these target types of things that floating is good for. Did you do like total research ahead of time and know all the stuff, or are you kind of learning stuff as you go a little bit?
Most of the research was all done before. So I floated for the first time about 6 or 7 years ago. And it was a crazy time in my life. I had quit a corporate job. I was sort of searching for something new. My wife and I were expecting twins.
Oh, geez.
There was a lot going on, a lot of stress. Yeah. I was going through a little bit of a crisis where I was, I left a really good gig, and I left with another gig lined up.
Okay. I just have to stop you there because I exactly relate, because I just left my job. I was in high-tech sales for 16, 17 years. And I left. It was big #1 company without something lined up, so I could kind of midlife crisis, so I could change things. I've got kids in school. One just graduated from college, believe it or not, and then I also have a 3-year-old. So I can so relate to what you're saying. I know exactly what you mean. So actually, how did you find this then? So you got all this stuff going on. That's pretty stressful. It was just from that experience? You said, hey, that was really cool, and you just kind of looked into it?
Yeah, well, I had heard of floating. So I was on the corporate side of health and wellness for 15 plus years. And you had always kind of heard of flotation therapy, kind of the holy grail of wellness, and quite frankly, thought it was all bullshit. But I started to see it a lot more. And so, one day, on a day when I was feeling pretty low, and, again, my wife and I, it was tough. And I decided to get a float session, and I didn't know much about it. And I went and floated with very little expectation, which I think is a really good way to approach it.
Yeah, that's how mine was. I didn't really know what to expect.
And I've always struggled with slowing my mind. I've always, struggled with meditation. My mind is always racing. And I floated. And I think I floated for 2 hours. Yeah, I did float for 2 hours. It felt like I was in there for 10 minutes.
Yeah, mine went really fast, I have to say. When it was over, I'm like, Wait a minute. I was just getting settled in a little bit, for my first time.
That's a really good one. If you lose the passage of time,
yeah,
you're in it, right? The mind is basically at rest.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's really good. So 2 hours later, I emerged from this float room, basically. It was late at night. I kind of felt, I felt different. And I've always kind of prided myself on being unaffected.
Stoic.
Nothing affects me.
Jeff the Stoic.
And then I came out of it and I was like, wow, that did something. And I didn't know what it did. And I know that I got in my car and I looked in my rearview mirror, and the best way I could feel is like I felt younger. Like I felt like I used to feel 20 years ago when I was in my mid-20s, and like I just felt like this relaxed energy. And I was smitten, and from there I started to really kind of dig in and learn more about it, because I kind of wondered what happened. Like, why do I feel this way? And then I was floating a lot for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. But at this point, when did you get that inkling? So you enjoyed it, you're looking into it. When did a little switch flip and you're like, hey, I could make a business out of this?
Soon thereafter, because I wanted to share the experience with people, my wife specifically, and some other, loved ones, friends and family. And I realized that there are some great places to float around town, but there was a certain something missing for. There just needed to be something more, something
like a full experience. You mean?
A full experience, something that something that could introduce floating to people that wouldn't ordinarily jump into flotation therapy.
Got it.
And then it was a couple-year process, and then we opened the doors of Pause.
Wow. Well, one thing I noticed, now I've never been to any other ones, although I know someone that's been to a couple where they were a little queasy about the cleanliness and all that, which kind of kept me from trying it back then. But as you know, I actually work out literally next door at Krav Maga LA. I've been going there for 3 years, and I teach the kids in beginners class, and I always walk by there. It looks really nice. It's got, where there's no sharp corners, kind of rounded. And when I went in there the first time, there was a nice little meditation area or calm area or what have you. So it was a nice environment, kind of smelled nice in there. And then the pod room was really cool because it's sitting right in the middle of this kind of calm room, and you got this bright blue water and a nice shower. And you really did a good job, I think, with the experience, with the environment. It was a nice, clean, calm type of environment that I think, maybe you would think of a high-end spa maybe would have something like that.
Yep, absolutely. We want people to start, and it's so cheesy, but we want people to pause as soon as they step in our door.
Right.
And so the design, it was meticulously designed. Like everything has its purpose, Unfortunately, my home looks nothing like it, but
So was it hard to start this business? Like, was it hard to find the equipment? Did you have to source it, from abroad, or like, how did you find some of the functional pieces?
Yeah. So there's, flotation, it's been a thing for a while. It just hasn't been, it just kind of hasn't hit. So there's a number of different manufacturers out there. There's a number of different pieces of technology out there. So I just really met with a lot of different float studios. I took some road trips to various cities and met with owners. I met with float pod manufacturers until I found the one that I thought, that I know is the best. So I landed on a manufacturer out of Virginia. And I have them kind of locked up exclusively here in Southern California and potentially beyond. And they're the same manufacturer that supplies the New England Patriots, the Houston Texans.
Oh, wow.
A number of different Big Ten schools. They actually also provide, float technology to the U.S. military.
Oh. Are they using it?
They are. Oh, tons.
Really?
Yeah.
What do they use it for? Like just
lots of different things, right? I mean, we haven't really gone into the benefits yet, but flotation therapy is the most amazing physical regenerative tool that there is at this point, and there's a lot of interesting mental sort of benefits.
Well, why don't we talk about that now? The regenerative part. What?
Sure. So if we want to talk about the physical side, flotation therapy made a big hit because the Golden State Warriors and Steph Curry about 2 years ago started floating habitually. And so one of the things that happens when you're floating is you're in this body temperature water, you're effortlessly floating in 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt. And as you had referenced earlier, people have been soaking in Epsom salt baths for centuries, physical regeneration. Nothing like 1,000 pounds. And when you're soaking in 1,000 pounds of it, it increases circulation. It reduces inflammation. It's nourishment to the body. It's great for the hair, skin, and bones. So that alone.
Yeah, that's good right there.
Yeah, that alone is amazingly regenerative for the physical body. You're also laying in a near weightless environment. So when you're lying in the float pod, your back expands, your joints unwind. Not being compressed by gravity. And again, what that does is that increases circulation. When you shut off sight and sound, where the mind is not distracted by anything that's going on around, the mind's able to focus within. Basically, the conscious mind goes to sleep. The subconscious mind is able to take all that brain resource and put it towards where it wants to put it, right? So if you have sore quads from a workout, you're soaking in magnesium sulfate. Amazing. You're in a near gravity-free environment, so you're getting full circulation of those quads. Amazing. You shut off sight and sound, and you're harnessing the power of the brain to focus on that quad's recovery. That's where the magic happens. So, Joe Rogan helped make flotation therapy famous.
Yeah.
One of his big hits is because a ton of MMA fighters have used flotation therapy for years. Nobody beats themselves up more than those guys. So they float pod for physical recovery.
Yeah, I'm a big MMA fan. So that's I'm curious. I haven't heard of any. Have you thought about trying to get any famous MMA fighters to come into your studio?
Yeah, they're all in Las Vegas. But I know that the UFC training facility in Las Vegas has float pods.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Now, what about, so the mental side of it is also the fact that your brain is quiet. But see, in my case, like the first half, I'm actually usually very calm. I try to do a little bit of meditation in the morning sometimes. I've got an app for it. But I found my mind was a little bit racing. So I did not, and that was an internal thing, right? So right. What are the mental aspects of this?
So, the mental aspects is, the foundation of flotation therapy wasn't, about the physical recovery. The foundation of this was built because there was a scientist who believed that sensory deprivation was the best way for the mind to treat things like PTSD, anxiety disorders, etc. Because when you allow the mind to truly rest, the mind's able to address a lot of different issues, and some different areas of the brain are sort of able to be engaged that we might have a harder time engaging during our waking day. So, basically when the mind is able to slow down and relax, that fight or flight response is subdued. The stress hormone cortisol is reduced, which is basically like poison, pulsating through our body is almost 24 hours a day these days. And, when the mind's at rest, the right brain is able to ignite, the left brain is able to quiet. So there's increased creativity, There's increased ability to learn. And again, a huge component of this is stress reduction. And when you're able to, again, let the mind rest, it's able to address so many different sort of mental ailments, let's call it. Mm-hmm. And, there's actually a place called the Laureate Institute for Brain Research in Tulsa, Oklahoma, headed by a doctor by the name of Justin Feinstein. And he actually just published a study about a month ago that's publicly available. Okay. And it was a study where they took, I believe, 30 people that suffered from some sort of anxiety disorder, et cetera, and they gave each of them one float session. And then they sort of measured pre-levels and post-levels of stress and anxiety, and every single one experienced a reduction after just one float session. Yeah, so we're at just the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, do you think it's going to get to the point where everybody's got, everyone has a shower, obviously. They might have a little float pod in their garage? Is it going to...
It's a little cost prohibitive, but I can certainly see flotation therapy being adopted in the medical community. Okay. And there's a couple of interesting studies that are happening on, flotation therapy versus psychotropic medication for things like anxiety disorders. And we'll see what happens. And a lot of us in the community believe that flotation therapy can actually do what a lot of that stuff does. If we can just get, mainstream medicine to start to really kind of embrace it. And, there's a couple of studio owners out there that are really bullish about this. So we're excited to see what happens.
So that's kind of interesting because I personally think there's too much medication in this society, just pasting over millions of people, right? Just pasting over, blanketing whatever problems they might have, which I don't think the medication is necessarily the cure. They're just treating symptoms. Sure. So it's kind of interesting that you're involved in something that could actually change that aspect of healthcare. That's kind of a much bigger picture than just having a spa, right? It's kind of cool.
That's what's so exciting is, flotation therapy is backed by science, and sooner than later, general population is going to know that. And I don't want to be like a conspiracy theorist about, but yeah, I agree with you, right? It's like, there's a perpetual cycle of, revenue and,
I don't think that's a conspiracy. That's just a fact that you've got a whole industrial complex and, it's made to distribute this stuff.
Sleep, right? Hydrate, rest,
could go a long way.
Not that I do those sort of things, but I'd like to.
Yeah. So with all this potential ahead of you, what do you envision for Pause Float and yourself? Moving forward, like, are you going to take over the world? Like, if you're saying you might have this particular pod, locked up, are you going to have like 1,000 of these, like a Starbucks in every corner? It's going to be Pause Float in every corner, or what's your plan? What's your vision?
That sure would be nice, but right now, basically, we open Pause with flotation therapy, but we've added infrared saunas.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that for sure.
And we're adding potentially a third and fourth modality.
What's that?
Well, I don't want to. It's not set in stone yet.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's all things that live very nicely with floating and sweating.
Okay.
And basically, what Pause is going to become, it's going to become more of a destination for regeneration rather than just flotation therapy. Although flotation therapy will be the foundation. So, what I see with Pause, and we're currently looking at multiple locations to expand to in partnerships. The idea is to open a lot of these.
Right.
The public needs it. The demand is there. And as we expand our offerings, sky's the limit.
What are the business challenges? Because you have not only the technical aspects of running it, but you do need a certain amount of space, right? And a certain, I guess, turnover you'd want. But are those challenges to scaling big?
Yeah, I mean, not particularly. I think the biggest challenge with this is that the people that need this the most are the ones that are most hesitant to come in because they think that they don't have the time.
Okay.
Right. So it's a very interesting discussion because,
I mean, like really stressed out people that are so busy and they think, oh, I don't have the time to go in that thing for an hour, that type of thing.
We're built for you. If that's how you feel, then that's why. If you don't think you have an hour, then you should spend 2 hours at pause.
Right.
That's kind of the way it works. I would say that our biggest objection is that it's just time. People.
Hey, that's a great marketing slogan. If you don't have an hour, give us 2. Spend 2.
Yeah, absolutely. The business itself, there's a lot of institutional knowledge for the business. I mean, there's a lot of learnings. It's a pretty complicated business. But in terms of growth challenges, I mean, we have to look for, real estate space. We have to look for the right, clientele and all that good stuff. But, startup costs are pretty heavy.
Okay. Upfront capital for the machine.
Yeah, upfront capital. So, that's always a hurdle. But, the biggest challenge that we have is to convincing these people that need it to actually come in and do it.
Got it.
Ken, I feel so, once somebody comes in and does it, I feel great because I feel that whether they come back the next day or the next week or the next month, they're going to come back.
They're going to come back.
They're going to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to go back and try it again. So
right. It takes I think it takes 3 to 4 times typically for someone to really embrace and reap the benefits.
Yeah, I would say at least, I only have the experience of one, but I definitely need to go back again because I know I was, not quite fully sunk into it.
Sure.
So the IR sauna thing, how did you get into that? And how does that work? How does that light work through the skin I'm assuming that also has therapeutic.
Yeah. So, infrared saunas are also, a lot of the benefits of infrared saunas are very synergistic with flotation therapy.
Okay.
Infrared saunas, the way in which it works is that the infrared technology and the infrared rays sort of heat you from a much deeper level than a traditional sauna. So instead of the room getting really hot and then getting hot, it's a little more of the infrared technology heating you, which mimics kind of the heat and the warmth that we receive from the sun. So when you start to sweat and detox, it's coming from a much deeper, a deeper level. So it's much more efficient sweat.
So does it it gets deeper into your skin and muscles and warms up from there? Is that how it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the major byproducts of sweating in the infrared sauna is relaxation. It kind of affects the production of cortisol in a somewhat similar fashion to flotation therapy.
Okay.
It burns a ton of calories. It purifies the skin. It helps increase the production of white blood cells. A lot of people come in, if you start to feel like you're getting a little sick, you just jump in the infrared sauna, and a lot of people say that made a tremendous difference.
Now, is that from the heat and sweating, or is there something that's jump started, like your immune system or something?
Yeah, it's from the heat that then in turn ignites the immune system and the production of white blood cells.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. And, one of the interesting things about pairing a sweat and a float is during an infrared sweat, there is an opioid called dynorphin that is oftentimes produced within the body. And dynorphin makes the body very susceptible to endorphins.
Okay.
A lot of people, a lot of our repeat clients will say when they sweat and then they float, they're able to feel the effect of the float with much greater intensity because of the fact that dynorphin had been flushed through their system during the sauna session. And again, we're at the front of this, right? So this stuff can change but that's kind of the latest and greatest. And it makes a lot of sense given the anecdotal feedback that we receive from clients.
Yeah, I'm going to try that for sure. I think I'm going to wait till I have like my next belt test, because the next couple of days after that are brutal. Now I'm all covered in bruises, and I'd just be curious after that to go in and give that a try. Well, maybe I won't wait that long, but I definitely want to try it after after a session like that. Yeah, I think. So I know I'm just trying to think of the different target audiences you might have. So, there's all you being in the health or the fitness industry beforehand. So there's that whole side of people that are working out, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's people that, and I guess that would include yoga and all that kind of fitness type of person. And then there's the people that are just looking for more general therapy. And then there's pregnant people. What about older people, let's say elderly? Is that?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of interesting studies that that talk about flotation therapy and its effect on things like rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, chronic back pain. There's a very big sort of medical use for flotation therapy. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of go back to, I think you said targets.
Yeah.
It's so broad, right? We already touched on athletes, professional athletes, weekend warrior athletes. We can talk about people with chronic pain. We could talk about people with, mental disorders.
Oh, mental disorders. How would that?
Again, quieting the
calm
brain.
the mind, quiet the brain. Okay.
We could talk about people, type A, people that where stress is killing them. High blood pressure, high heart rate, a stressed out executive. We can look at creatives, right? When you visit pause and you float, again, the right side of the brain is ignited. And so a lot of artists come in for creative stimulation. Touched on pregnancy. It's really, it literally is everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Because we're all affected by stress. We're all affected by stress, whether it be physical or mental.
Right.
There's nobody out there, that's not touched by it. With cell phone technology, social media, the news cycle. I mean, we're all getting bombarded with it.
Yeah, and it's just getting worse. Civilization in general, and especially the Western culture, it's crazy how much data and information is coming in at the same time, which you can't really process it all. It's a little overwhelming. Yeah.
It can't be done.
So, wow. I mean, you have me excited about all this stuff. What's going to happen in the future? I'm not even in the business. It sounds like a great. It sounds like a great franchise opportunity. Right? Yeah, franchise a pod.
Yeah.
Did you? So, when you were getting into this and doing your research, did you have any specific mentors, or is it just kind of a community and everyone's kind of trying to feel their way? Or is there one main guy that was like the main altered states guy that, the scientist that said, this is the way to go and everyone's following this guy?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say that, throughout my life, I've had a lot of mentors that have been amazing. But, I think with the flotation industry, I think one of the coolest things about the industry is everybody helps each other. So, if I called out one, I'd have to call out 100 people that I spoke to that helped me, that gave me honest feedback, honest opinions about how to operate the business, what pods to go with, how to market. There's just so many amazing people out there. And everybody seems to want to pay it forward. So, I talk to a lot of different people that are interested in opening closers. I'm going to be an open book with them. I'm going to help them in any way that I can. There is a group out of Portland called Float On that has some really good, they have an ancillary business called Floating Solutions, I believe. And they offer a lot of mentorship and training for those that want to open a float studio.
Okay.
They also put on an annual float conference that it's a big conference. I mean, it's a big deal.
So don't tell me everyone's sitting there and they're in their own pod, right? I mean,
there's about 1,000 people there, so that'd be a lot of pods.
No, I know that's yeah. I was picturing like the Matrix or something. Everyone's
but the community it's been so helpful. It's really nice, and that's going to be something that's going to be interesting as the industry progresses and as more entrants come into the marketplace. Is if we can stay with that kind of vibe, mm-hmm. that kind of tribe. There's a lot of VC money looking at flotation therapy. There's a lot of corporate America looking at flotation therapy. So I know that we and the studio owners that I'm friends with, we really hope it still is able to kind of keep this feeling of community.
Right. What have you learned from your past in the fitness industry that applies directly to what you're doing now? Like, because I think, I don't know, I'm on the outside, is it somewhat akin to running a gym? I mean, is there going to be monthly memberships or is it a completely different thing because you have a little bit more of a higher purpose? I think it's
it's different and the same. I think when you look at cleanliness it's so important, right? In any real successful gym, high-end gym, cleanliness is important, right? So that's one. But I think the biggest thing is service. Ultimately, health and fitness, flotation therapy, it's a service. And what that means to me is when a customer comes in, you make them feel like they're coming to your house. You greet them with warmth. You greet them with authenticity. You make them feel comfortable. You answer all their questions, and you really get to know them. Like that's one of the things that we really pride ourselves at Pause, is that we're friends. When a customer comes in, we become their friends because we listen to them. We understand what they're looking for. We explain flotation therapy in a manner in which they're able to understand. And that's just huge. That's just huge. It's very different than the fitness industry because, in the fitness industry, you could see 1,000 people a day.
Right. It's a little bit more intimate, I guess, what you're doing.
It's very personal. And that's the beauty of the business, is that when somebody comes in to Pause, we can see a maximum of, say, eight or 9 people every hour and a half. So that gives us an opportunity to really engage with every single customer.
I didn't realize you could get that much turnover, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So do you, how often do you float? Like what daily practices do you have? And, or does floating fall in there for you?
Oh,
being the busy person you are, who doesn't have an hour.
I used to float all the time. And I will say that I used to try to float at least once a week, ideally twice per week.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, it's been a little difficult. It's been a pretty challenging 2018. Not business related, but there's just been stuff happening, in life and accidents, etc. And so 2018 has been a little bit crazy. I've got 3.5-year-old twins at home.
I have a 3.5-year-old boy, so I know what that's like.
Yeah, but I would love twice a week. I think is perfect.
Yeah, because the effects would wear off after a little bit, right? And you kind of get back into the regular world. So
they are cumulative, though. The more you float, the more you're able to kind of grasp, and it becomes more like riding a bike in terms of being able to kind of slow down and sort of embrace that tranquility.
So kind of a muscle memory
Yep.
to relax, so to speak.
Yep.
Okay.
The effect of float, that you could feel it for days. But other than that, I used to be a hardcore, strict diet cardio lifting. I was an athlete, most of my life. But these days it's really just everything in balance. Like I don't try to overindulge in things, but I don't deprive myself of things.
Yeah.
For me, that works.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm the same way as well. One thing I wanted to mention before I forgot is I like your ads on Instagram. They're kind of sexy metaphysical, if that makes sense. Sexy
Right.
Metaphysical / artsy.
Yeah.
Is that aimed at well, I'm getting them somehow. Do you aim those? How do you aim those at the right target audience?
So
on Instagram.
On the Instagram, it's basically you're looking at people that look like the people that are engaged with you on Instagram, right? So it's people that are similar interests, people that are geo-targeted. It's kind of off that birds of a feather flock together type mentality, right? So you're basically taking what our customer looks like, what our followers look like, and find people like them in the area. Yeah. Which is interesting though, right? Because like we discussed, it's so broad. And I can't stress that enough, Ken, is you could come into Pause, and in the meditation room that you referenced is a room that we serve this really delicious organic herbal reishi tea. So after your service, we escort you into the meditation room. We serve you, we present to you this tea.
Yeah, that was nice, actually. That was nice.
Yeah, and it's nice because you poke your head into that room and you'll see 4 people in there. And they're 4 people that would never be in the same room outside of it. Pause. You might have like a zany art student. And then you have this, a corporate attorney for Fox in there.
Right.
Pregnant mom, and then you have a yoga instructor from, Love Yoga, and they're all sitting in this room, and it's really fun because there's a connection. People talk in that room. Sometimes people talk, they're in there for an hour after their session. They might not talk to each other ever again, but it's nice in a moment to have all these different people with all these different interests and all these different lifestyles share like a common experience.
Yeah, that actually happened to me when I was there, and you were there. You were talking to somebody,
yep.
And I overheard him talking about the Marines, and I have a friend that's in the Marines, and just kind of started chatting from there. So I can attest to that.
Oh, nice, it's really nice.
So on the Menceptional podcast, there are a couple things we try to do. One, we like to see how men have, followed their passion and carved their own path. And, you fit right smack in the middle of being a poster boy for that. You had a job that, wasn't jiving with you. And then you found something, whether incidentally or not, that you had a passion for, and then you jumped into it. Do you have any thoughts you could share in that, or any tips, like just do it or whatever for other men who are trying to do the same thing? Because that wouldn't be, you wouldn't necessarily think I'm going to go open a float studio. Right. So do you have any thoughts on that, or, what was your thinking there? Or did you just do it? You didn't even think about it?
No, I thought about it a lot. So, I had wanted to do it, and I did the time. Like I searched, I researched, I thought long and hard about doing it. And for me, it made sense and it worked. So I jumped.
Right.
I have a partner in the business that helps, and I was going to make a change. It was coming and it was happening.
Right.
This is the one that I wanted it to happen the most. And I didn't blindly jump in.
Right. Yeah. You put some work into it, deciding about it, even though it was a passion.
Right.
And it sounds like it still takes a lot of work now to make it happen, right? Nothing just happens by itself.
But what I'd like to say is, I'd like to be someone that says, just do it. F it, just do it.
Yeah.
And I think that, if I was a little bit younger, if I didn't have a family, then I could say, just do it.
Right.
In my situation, I had to think it through. I had to do that type of due diligence, right, to make the right move. And I will say, my wife also left the corporate world and started her own business, and a business owner as well. We had 2 boutiques that she owned, and she did it a couple of years before I did. So, I got to tell you, some of the inspiration was watching her quit the corporate world, do her own thing, be the captain of her own ship, and watch her. And that, that really definitely did help inspire me.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So this is kind of a rhetorical question. It sounds to me like you are happy that you made that decision, and regardless of whatever obstacles you have to go over. And, because let's say you didn't have a passion for this, how much harder would it be? And would you be successful, do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely not. You got to have a passion for it, right? Like, what's that adage, right? You find somebody that's passionate about their work, and you'll find a person that's never worked a day in their life.
Yeah, I like that one.
A passion could come, like for me, I'm passionate about people. Like, I love to talk to people. I love to be around people. You marry that with my enthusiasm for flotation therapy and healing, and bam, there it is.
And there it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess
go back. I would go back.
No. Well, you've made it over the hump. You've already gone over, past the point where you're not going to go back, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's
knock on wood, right?
At 3 a.m. when I'm, knee deep in salty water, changing a filter, trying to fix a ozone bulb in the unit, I might think, man, that corporate gig sounds good, but
no, I don't believe it. Well, I'm really excited for you. Thanks for sharing with us a little bit of your journey. And I would suggest anybody who hasn't tried it to go and try it. What's the best way for people to find you and Pause? I guess you could go to the website, but maybe you could just give us some links that people can go to and check it out.
Sure. So it's Pause, PAUSE, floatstudio.com. So it's PAUSE, FLOATSTUDIO.com. And also, we love to talk. We love to talk. So you can call the studio, 310-439-1972, or email hi@pausefloatstudio.com. That's a shared email. I get that email. Members of the team get that email. So I'm reading all of them. So I'd love to talk to anybody about the business, about setting you up for a session. I am a firm believer that everybody should try it at least once, preferably more than that.
Yeah.
You've got to at least give yourself the opportunity to feel, to really grasp and embrace, how you can feel when the mind is clear.
Yeah.
Feels amazing.
That's a good, that's not a lead magnet per se, but you're pretty confident when someone comes in and experiences it. There was actually a lady that when I was there, she did it her first time, and she went out in the parking lot or at the parking, and then she came back in like, "Hey, I feel great. I want to buy a couple more sessions." So I think you got something there. Yeah. So Jeff, thanks so much for sharing with us. I'll be seeing you. I'm going to try the IR sauna next. And I think this is a great thing. You're getting into a broader picture, a very, personal picture, personal health. There's medical health. There's just, you're hitting a lot of different areas with this. So it's pretty exciting. And I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice, and you're executing, really well from my experience. So definitely appreciate sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me, Ken. I really appreciate it. We want to see you.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll tell the Krav Maga people about it. Tell them to hop next door. Okay, awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, take care.